Hello there folks, E3 has come to an end. It's over for another year until June 9th next year. The actual E3 exhibition starts on my birthday next year. Maybe I might go for once. But I've covered E3 to death, I've covered all the press conferences, I've covered my most anticipated games. One more thing to wrap up, Nintendo Treehouse Live has been streaming all week. There's been about 15 hours of it, so I've watched all 15 hours and wrapped it up to this video so you don't have to. There are some small things. Sakuna of Rice and Ruin, an indie game, you cannot pet the dog. Very important, though they're thinking of patching it in. Overcooked 2 has new DLC that's out now. Cadence of Hyrule was shown off, looks very good, it's out now. I'll be spending most of my weekend playing that. And if you want my thoughts on Animal Crossing and Luigi's Mansion, which were shown relatively extensively here, you can check them out in my 5 most anticipated games from E3, because I talked about them there. So there's 4 more things that I think are relatively noteworthy, 2 of which I think made big news, 1 of which I think will be relatively controversial. But I'll run through them now, starting with Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. Just a very important small detail that Deadpool gets very mad when you knock over his tacos. You have the forces of evil invading X Mansion, and Deadpool doesn't care about any of that, but you hurt his tacos, and he will come for you. I'm looking forward to Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. It looks like it'll be a fun, brainless hack and slash time with cool Marvel characters thrown in everywhere, and it has a pretty darn deep roster of characters. It's not just the MCU. Fire Emblem Three Houses. Fire Emblem Awakening is one of the greatest games of all time, and then Fire Emblem Fates was just kind of like more of Awakening. It had like the children's system again, even though it had like the 3 games idea, that it was 3 separate stories wrapped into one and you had to pay for each story. But it just felt like an iteration on what Awakening was doing. It was a good game, but it didn't feel new and fresh and different, and this really does. This feels like the next like big step in the Fire Emblem series. You're a teacher at a school, you choose one of the houses and you have a bunch of students, and then apparently the game is like split in half, where the second half is like in the future with your students fighting a war, and then the first half is you just like going through school with your students, and you take them through classes and you take them through private lessons, and you choose the paths that they develop into and the kind of characters and the kind of classes they develop into, and you build their relationships. It seems staggeringly deep, like stupidly deep, and thankfully apparently you can just skip all of it if you want. You can like auto run all of the classes, so if you just want to blitz right through it right to the end, you can do that too. But this is one of the big like deep gameplay showings of it, and it looks so good. It looks on a level of customization that this series just hasn't gone for before. Like usually you have your characters, you find new characters, they're already in classes, and you just expand on their classes. And in this one you can basically customize your entire team, choosing the classes, tweaking them, adding different elements. It's probably going to consume my life in July. That's all I'm saying. Mario Maker will consume my life in June, and then this will consume my life in July. One of the biggest, most controversial things to come out of E3, now never mind Nintendo Treehouse Live or Nintendo's Direct at E3, E3 in general, is the news that as of right now, Pokemon Sword and Shield won't have a national dex. So basically there will be a certain number of Pokemon in the game, in the Galar dex. It won't be all of the Pokemon, and the rest of the Pokemon won't be compatible with Sword and Shield for now. This was very controversial news, and I can see why. People are very attached to their Pokemon. If their favorite Pokemon suddenly isn't in Sword and Shield, I can understand why that would be upsetting to people. I can understand why people would be not too enthused with the idea that they can't play with their Grimer in Pokemon Sword and Shield. I don't know if Grimer's in the game, I'm just using Grimer as an example. I know this is probably gonna make some people mad, but I'm pretty okay with it, because like, first of all, just the logistics of putting every Pokemon in every Pokemon game is becoming increasingly untenable. You cannot do it at this stage. Say they add 100 Pokemon to Sword and Shield, there's 100 new Pokemon, that's going to bring us up to over 900 Pokemon. So everything you want to do in that game, you have to do it for 900 playable characters with all those animations. And then people are like, oh, well, they should just do it. They should just delay the game for a year and do it. Okay, so they delay the game, it takes 4 years. They release it next year. What do you do for Gen 9 when there is presumably over 1,000 Pokemon? Do you delay the game for another year? It takes 5 years to make a new generation of Pokemon. What do you do for Gen 10 when there's presumably over 1,100 Pokemon? Again, do you just let Pokemon like increasingly exponentially take longer to make because you're trying to squeeze all of these Pokemon into this game? Like, it has reached a tipping point. It has reached a breaking point where Game Freak have to make that call. They have to make the call of, do we put all of the Pokemon in these games and then build everything we have to do around the fact that they put all of the Pokemon in those games? Or do they finally have to draw the line? And they do. They have to draw the line eventually. Even if they buckle and put all of the Pokemon in Sword and Shield, they can't do that next time. They just can't. There'll be over 1,000 of them. And you always see people say things like, oh, I'd love if the Pokemon could follow you in the field. Or I'd love if the wild Pokemon appeared in the field. Both of which I personally would also like. But then you think about how there's 900 Pokemon. So every time Game Freak think of, wouldn't it be cool if we put all the Pokemon out in the field and you ran into them for wild Pokemon encounters? They have to do that for 900 Pokemon. They have to animate that for 900 Pokemon. It was fine for Pokemon Let's Go because it was back to 150. So they could have them follow you in the field, and they could have them appear in the wild. And they could do that because they only had to deal with 150 Pokemon. When you have to deal with 900, and you have to do that for every single feature you think about putting into the game, that takes a lot of time. And the idea of just, hire more animators or just take longer to make the games, again, that might be fine now, but Gen 9, Gen 10, Gen 11, we've reached a tipping point. The third game of the series might just become, we've put all the Pokemon in now, and I can see why people would see that as a little cynical. Because, we've released the first 2 games where there's not all the Pokemon, then you have to buy the third one to get all the Pokemon. And I kind of agree that's a little cynical, but I think equally it's informed by the fact that they have to draw the line in the sand eventually. They cannot keep putting all of the Pokemon in all of these games, because it'll take too long. And it's the biggest anchor around the series at the moment, because any feature they come up with has to be scaled for 900 Pokemon. That's just the way it is. And if they keep putting all the Pokemon in these games, that's the way it will continue to be. So as I said, I understand why people are mad about it. I understand people like collecting all the Pokemon. They like having their favorite Pokemon in every game. But I think we've just reasonably hit a stage where Game Freak can't do that anymore. There's too many of them. And the other big news coming out of Nintendo Treehouse Live was the fact that friends, I can play with you in Mario Maker. There's people out there who are like, how did they not think of this in the first place? And I've no doubt there's people on the Mario Maker development team who are shouting from the rooftops about how you had to be able to play with your friends. You had to be able to say, you, my friend, I would like to play a co-op level in Mario Maker with you. And for whatever reason, they said no. But there's definitely people who are fighting for that there. But yeah, it seems really baffling that they're like, oh no one wants that. We don't need to put that in the final game. But thankfully, they have listened, and they are putting that in the final game. Whether or not it's there at launch, we'll see. But they said it's going to be added in an update, so maybe that's a little after launch. Either way, playing with friends in Mario Maker 2 will be a thing. And every time they showcase co-op levels, whether it was at the World Championships or whether it was on Treehouse Live, it looked so much fun. I can't wait to play co-op levels. It's great. And the idea that you can make these levels to be co-op, it just opens Mario Maker up to a whole new level of play that I think is very, very fun and very exciting. Creating co-op puzzles and co-op levels and co-op ideas, I think, will make it a lot of fun. I'm interested to see, though, how the tagging works for that, because I know there's multiplayer tags. Will the filtering system take the multiplayer tags out if you're playing single player? We'll see. Hopefully it should, because if there's a level that can only be beaten through co-op, it would be very problematic if that started showing up in, say, the Endless Mario mode. But I assume they've accounted for that. I hope they've accounted for that. For one really frustrating thing, Pokemon, they at least fixed another frustrating thing for people with Mario Maker playing with friends online. There was tons of gameplay, as usual, from Treehouse Live, if you want to look at gameplay from Link's Awakening, from Animal Crossing, from Luigi's Mansion, from Marvel Ultimate Alliance. Watching it is always going to do a better job of me than talking to you about it. If you just want to see what the game looks like, and Link's Awakening looks so pretty, god damn it, that art style is lovely, and anyone that didn't like it at first is objectively wrong. But yeah, that's Treehouse Live. As usual, it's always a fun watch. It's always fun to actually see deeper dives into gameplay in these games, and Treehouse Live always does that for you. Plus, we had some surprisingly big news coming out of it this year. So that's it for E3. Until next year, I'm not going to say the words E3 ever again in my life. I've said them far too many times in the last week. What's this, the 7th video or something about E3? Far too many. Thank you for watching if you watched them all. Thank you for watching if you only watched one of them. On your left, a recap of my 5 most anticipated games from E3. On your right, a recap of the Nintendo Direct from E3. Thanks for watching.